one more solution possible which is different than what existed before, either because new materials have come or maybe new ways of setting have come or whatever that is. Right? So there is a possibility of bringing one more solution. Right? This also remains true with films. There's always this triangle about hero, heroine and a villain. And films are made and made and made again and again. So that means there are many solutions to this kind of situation. So that also is a creative problem. Yeah? Agreed? So Subhash Ghai is creative. Now we get into a problem. Last time, remember we discussed a little bit about, we just showed, there are other things about the architect design, etc., etc. We can quickly go through that. And one thing is important is that creativity is a part of design creation. Then is Subhash Ghai creative or is Satyajit creative or do writers design? And this is where we thought that, all creative problem solving need not necessarily be good design. The reason is that some of the creative problem solving is converted into formulas. Okay, remember the formula issue that we talked about, that all number of mainstream Hindi films have a formula. And we discussed that kind of formula, that either brothers two separate, one becomes an inspector, other becomes a thief or something like that. Or, there are formulas like there has to be a trip to Switzerland or something like that. There has to be a train with a chase from a hero in a motorcycle or a swanky car, right? And I don't know how he drives, but he stands and does all kinds of things. Yeah. Then there has to be a policeman who always come late, right? Where the hero has already done the work. All these kind of formulas exist, right? Including the formulas to the way people dress and in various roles. Then there are other filmmakers who don't follow formulas. Okay? So creativity is going away from formulas to explore something new. And I also explained you from some examples from architecture that there is a streak of madness. You cannot design without some amount of madness in it. You have to defy what exists right now. Okay? There is a high stake on innovation, the high stake on being different, high stake on crossing the borders. So a good design would always require that you go away from what exists. I showed you example of falling water and things like that. I eliminated that. But you require a streak of madness to think of actually building it on top of a waterfall, right? And get the waterfall through the building on outside. Okay? So you need some amount of madness. I'm madness, and I'm not saying in a standard word madness, but you need that kind of a ability to see things differently, to challenge what normally people would think about and come out with great ideas. You can look at when some of you are from graphic design background and all, you've seen advertisements. Why Fevicol advertisements are always getting prizes? They think differently, right? Fortunately now, for the last 5 years, you will see that standard of advertising in India is improving quite a bit. There are very nice advertisements which have come, which show, they just surprise you, right? Saying, oh, that seems to be simple, but I never thought about it. Now, that is what is important. They could be simple, but should lead to a surprise. Good design is always a surprise. Alright, so we can, this is something which we forget. So that was just by way of revising what we did, because it was almost about 1.5 months of gap. Now, I thought I'll go to the next part of this lecture, and that is people watching. Any idea of what people watching could be? Observing people, okay. Who observes people? Huh? Everybody observes people. Okay. Then why designers should observe people and how that is different than others? I agree, everybody observes people.
For a particular purpose, how they are behaving for that particular purpose.
Are you a sociologist? Are you a behavior scientist? No. Huh? Are they sociologists? They are studying people. No? Sociologists also study people. In a way. Okay. So their purpose of observing people is right? That you want to see how they interact with product or how they interact with communication material or whatever. That's different than. Is there anything else? Is that enough? Why do you have to do that? Why do you have to observe people interacting with products? Okay.
So there are many varieties also. Like physical life,
Also to increase our mental activity, so that we don't miss out information.
Okay. Which means that you're sort of exploiting people, isn't it? Right? That you're trying to understand them so that your knowledge increases and then you can react. Which means you're dumb in the before. Isn't it? That you don't know about the problem, so you study people to understand them. Okay, that's one way of looking.
So I think they just want to understand their need.
Understand their needs. Okay? I'll catch you on that later. Okay. So he says that we study people so we understand their needs. Okay? So do politicians. Yeah? So do economists. Huh? They give solutions. Politicians are the only one who give solutions in India.
So actually politicians, they look for the hopes.
They look for the
They look for the hopes from the people. They don't understand the needs. They want something which abstracts or dena unko. Actual need is different and what people are hoping for.
Okay.
That's what they're catching it.
There's a drought here. So suddenly Sonia Gandhi, Manmohan Singh, all of them go surveying people, and that standard thing about interviewing some old ladies and they say we don't have anything to eat, things like that. Then suddenly, a lot of aid is given. Now, isn't that watching people and giving solutions? Aim is different. What is the aim? Scale is different. So designers work on small scale.
they are looking at more number of people and we are looking at specific.
Okay. Yeah. So you're designing a septic pin. Then you're talking over everybody, right? So maybe the number is not right.
People would also include the study of trends. That people like something or people dislike something. Same products are available in different brands. So what would they?
Don't politicians do that?
Everybody does it.
If they know what people like, that's exactly what they dangle in the election. Right? Saying this is what I can promise. So what is the difference? Okay, do other artists watch me? For instance, somebody who is working on a drama, does he watch me?
Yes.
He watches people, right? Painter? Not big yes, just half yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Did Mondrian watch them? People? Or they did that? Okay. Remember Mondrian's painting about just lines and color patches? So we can say all artists may not do it. Right? Do writers watch people?
Yes.
Yes, everybody else. Filmmakers watch people. But each of them watch from a different point of view. So designers also must have a point of view of his own when he watches people. What would that point of view be? What is that need? What's the central goal that designers have in watching people? Welfare? Not really. No?
It should be somewhere there.
Somewhere there. Okay. He doesn't want to give a big presence to welfare. So maybe a little bit of welfare is there. Then what is big there?
to provide a perfect solution. I mean, to fulfill the exact need. That's what I think. I would like.
Identification of the need is very important.
Identification. That is, he is trying to create his own knowledge, no? Because he started when he started, he was dumb, so he had to create that knowledge in order to identify. Is there something else why he watches?
Communicate properly.
Communicate.
There is communication, yeah.
Okay. All right, I'll just give you a small hint. Is there some selfish motive in watching people? Yes, what is that?
It is not always possible to think about a scenario. Like if I am designing a product, then how will the user will look? It is not always possible to think the daily routine of this time or the way he uses that product. So instead of just thinking about it, we do use the product and then in that context we analyze it. So it becomes easier for us to catch hold of new problems.
Fine. So there's some kind of some selfish motive. Anything else?
They design for the particular need to be met, but when the product actually comes to the market, people are maybe using it for a purpose that was never even imagined by the designer himself. Maybe there's some sort of establish to what extent,
That
in
is
how
a
many different ways.
post-design watching people, right? But how did it respond? But before designing, they do watch people. They said one of them is to, get familiar with the scenario so that you can react. What anything else? For pleasure. What kind of pleasure? Okay. So there are two views on it. Anything else?
So there is a new scope of
You spoke?
designing something new.
Designing something new.
Maybe identify behavioral patterns. In the sense that, say, office-going people, so are all the office-going people more or less same, or are they different? What are their quirks?
So you're looking at differences between people, right?
To establish patterns.
And see whether there are any patterns that exist. Why do you do that?
To get to know them better, I think that is the basic course.
Get to know them better. Okay, I'll leave the discussion as it is. We'll go through the lecture. I'm trying to prove that this whole watching people is absolutely a selfish job. That designers don't necessarily have anybody's welfare in mind. I mean, it's just as you said, it's small there, but it's just imagine the exact opposite of it. That you are put in a dark room and you have no exposure to that country. Suppose you're taken to some country like Alaska or something and put it in one of those igloos or something like that, and you're not supposed to see anything. And say now you design something for Alaskan people. Will you be able to do it? No. Which means that basically you need to watch people for ideas. And that's very selfish. It's not that you had Alaskan people's welfare in your mind. That maybe they're small and it's like politicians can always make it large and say, no, I have your welfare in my mind. That's fine. But to basically get ideas, it's important to watch people. So watching people is, and there is nothing wrong in being selfish. Watch people with a selfish intent. But that does not mean you get ideas if you're selfish. You need something more than that. Okay? A certain level of competence. Just selfishness doesn't help. And that's what I want to show. So what happened to this show? Look at design in the historical aspect. This is the earliest washing machine. Yeah? It talks about, there's a water tub and there's a cylinder in which the clothes are there and rotated by hand. Obviously, another one, typewriter. How did these ideas come? How do you think you get this kind of ideas?
People watch other artists get insights into things that are mundane to them and that a product may be able to do for them.
So one very important, we're getting closer. Basically designers are looking for insights. Yeah? Watching people going through a very hard process of washing clothes, and laboring about it, probably gives you an idea saying, let me change this situation a little bit, let me make it easier for a person who is washing, and in the process create some kind of an innovative idea. Right? It may be as basic as this or as sophisticated as a current machine where you dump everything, just switch on and go and do wash and whatever that innovation is. Basically you're looking for insights which you can convert into ideas. Okay. The insights would come from the fact that you watch people and you also watch and say that will they pay for the idea that you have in your mind. Right? Suppose this machine costs say 500 rupees or 5,000 rupees, will people pay for it or they won't pay for it? Sometimes you come out with ideas purely out of frustration. You can't read somebody else's handwriting. Okay? Just imagine the plight of your teachers when you submit your answer books and your exams. Everybody has a different handwriting, right? And everybody has different language. Language in the sense some people write in an SMS language. Okay? And we're supposed to understand all of that. Okay? Now, this is something which actually some situations of this kind make people react, saying, let us solve this problem. Okay? Let's try and find out how best we can do it. And that's the reason why need has always been considered as a source of innovation. Every language has a proverb which says something of this sort. In Marathi it is Garaj is Sudachi Jananiya. That's what is called in Marathi. In your language there will be something equivalent to that. It says that need is the basis of it. But so the point that I am making is, why I am saying designer is selfish, we soon forget the person whose need it is. Just imagine if we were to operate a Photoshop. Just imagine your design studio in which the Photoshop has to be operated by doing this. You climb something, stand on something and sit on something which is not a seat. And then you are supposed to do some operations. Will you do it? But you don't mind others doing it. Yeah? You've seen so many times there is a digging going on in front, some cable being laid or two cables are disjointed so that they make a tent and go on. Have you seen the plight of people who work? And they do it in all kinds of weathers. Yeah? So that's the reason why I'm saying that designers are selfish. They watch people only when they have a project, and the project is going to give them money. Otherwise, they don't want. Otherwise, you should have been concerned about it. No? You should have changed that situation. You don't. Look at the way, in spite of all that ergonomics that you have, this fellow sits on a L section, a steel L section. Somehow we don't seem to bother about it unless we are involved and we are getting paid for it. This is the way truck drivers get in. We expect, will you accept this if tomorrow your employer gives you a cabin where you have to get in like that every day? So every time you want to come out for a smoke or just want a tea, you get and getting down is more difficult. Getting in is okay. So we seem to accept things with some kind of a view of our own, saying that look, I'm not concerned, let him worry about what he wants to do. If somebody gives me a project, gives me a money, I'll start working on it. Till then, these are not a problem for us. Some problems are still not so easy to solve. This was on the left side. You see what is a traditional way of climbing tadi tree. Okay, this is where they have a rope which they kind of tie on the two sides and go up like that. There was a competition several years back with a fairly fancy prize to see whether a product can be developed which is safer than what it is right now, which is the traditional. A lot of people came out with ideas. Not a single one was better than the traditional one, nor safer than the traditional one. Okay, and took more time. It's still problem that's not solved. It's a very difficult problem to solve. Okay, so it doesn't mean that watching people will necessarily lead to better results. Okay, better results still needs creativity. All right, you can please read this. This is from Business Week editor. Okay, and this is actually a quotation that comes from a book called In Search of Excellence, which became one of the most popular books in the 80s. Same person, very young, wrote it, and there's a chapter called Close to Customers. Right? He says that most of the time people hate customers because he has a very clean idea, but then there are people who say this idea doesn't work or it's not for me or something like that, and people get very worried about it, saying no, let's keep them out. This is a good idea, we'll produce it. So by saying that, that's the reason why I'm saying that when we are watching people, we have a completely selfish motive of watching people. We are not solving a lot of problems for them. We are solving it from the point of view and with our own abilities. Okay. Yet watching people is an important aspect. And that's the reason why there's a book called Design with Man in Mind. Prairie Constance or something like that. It's quite it became quite popular. Okay, let me explain you what Man in Mind is. Okay, this is a Jula that's available for children years ago. This has a metal rod in the front with those plastic things children can play. You keep a child inside and one expects that the child will be happy. Okay. Most children do not like the idea of being separated from the parents, though parents want that to happen because they want to watch TV or cook or anything. So you go keep a child and say, be happy there. Swing is common in India, but in other countries there is this play area defined by there's a kind of a small partition-like thing in which you play pan type of thing, in which you keep a child so that the child is safe. And it's not that you're worried about safety of the child. I mean, it's definitely not that you just want to neglect him, but at the same time you want to spend your time elsewhere. Okay? So the child is trying to explore the space around. Parents are obviously concerned with design. First thing is they are worried that that metal rod and that plastic, which often breaks, is going to hurt the child. So you can see how that is. They put a piece of cloth there so that the child is not hurt. They are also worried about the fact that this kind of a thing eats into the thighs, and that's not good for children. So they try and soften it and things like that. So if you haven't watched people, then you leave people to correct that product themselves. Right? Agreed? And that's the way you correct your plastic. Okay, it's too clean when you came, so you correct it by messing it around. And now it looks like microscope. Okay, so most people correct this. Okay, here is a little different kind of a product which one of the students in IDC designed some years ago. This is something which allows the child to sit inside, but the child can do many things. And you could see the difference in the face of the child. You cannot get that at that age group people to act. There are many things that a child can do, including sleep to the front. Okay. So it's somewhat like a horse, and you can do many more things. So you could see that if you watch children interacting and behaving with the product and without product, and look at what they want, what is it that they are expecting, it's possible to design a product that can be better. I'm not saying it's the ultimate solution, better than what exists before. Okay. So a lot of people say user first and all that. There's, I think, a movement called user first in Bangalore. There's some society, things like that. All that is done with an intention of getting more market, but also there is an underlying principle to get ideas. Okay. When this project was given, there were two different swings that were made. I think there is something interesting about it. This is one which was done by a boy, the other one was done by a girl. You guess which one. Left side, boy or girl? Girl. And right side? Boy. Okay. Unanimity. What? You're right. Okay. Now, why do you think so? The cartoon? Huh? Materials. Form of it. Okay. Whatever you said is right, but it explains a very small part of her idea. Her idea was that though you want to keep the child away, the child doesn't want to be close away from you. Okay. So what she did is a kind of a swing, which works as a swing, but it also works as a kind of haversack. You put it behind, so the child is next to you. Her idea is, I do not want it to become something which detaches me from my child. Okay, which is a very, very right thing to do and only mother would think about doing such thing. While the boy was more interested in getting a child to play. Not that there are moods in which child would like to be sitting on a chair like that, and there are moods when the child would like to be closer to the mother. It's not that one is better than others, but you could see that watching the same data, two people can come out with two different ideas because they have different points of views. And watching people without a point of view is useless. You have to have a point of view. Overall guiding principle, welfare of needs, understanding needs, getting your knowledge, welfare of the user, etc. is fine. But a point of view cannot be allowed. Okay. And last lecture when I showed you that how building on a waterfall and the Jewish museum, it was always a point of view. Point of view of a person who felt differently than many others. So do not worry about defending your point. If your point of view is not illogical, then there is a legitimate scope of including point of view in your solutions. Do not think of being so objective that design will come automatically or something like that. Your own involvement, your own point of view has a place in our design. Okay. This was another one. You've seen crutches being used by many people who are either temporarily or they have a amputated leg or something. Now, one of the problems that most of the people who handle crutch faces to climb staircases. Okay. In most other countries, there are laws which demand that you have to have a lift in all public buildings. Okay. There are separate toilets, all that is sort of ensured through laws. We do not have these laws. So there are elevators in most of the other countries, so they do not seem to need a crutch which allows people to climb staircases. So obviously the solution could not come from outside. It has to come from a context in which it is common. In India, most of the buildings do not have lifts. In fact, our law says that only if the building is above 4 stories that it requires a lift. That means you climb that much. Now, this is a context to which a designer reacted, and he came out with a small attachment to the crutch which allows him to climb staircases. You can actually see the demonstration how using that attachment he still remains stable. He doesn't even need to hold to the handrail. He can just jump on to the next one. And it's also equally good when you are ascending and descending. Understanding needs is an important aspect of it, but to develop a point of view is equally important. This project is a vendor's card. It was given by a municipal commissioner whose name you may have heard. His name was Khairna, right? Does it make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay, he's one of the most controversial commissioner who wanted to implement a Supreme Court judgment which says that hawkers are entitled to 1 square meter of footprint on a street, right? That was the Supreme Court judgment. Now he said, can you design a car which can handle the same amount that they sell, allow all the variety, right from vegetables to spectacle frames to all kinds of clothes and things like that, and still retain itself in transparency. Right now if you look at it, they have those carts which they pull, and the big wheels, cycle wheels are there, and they take care. The students did very good data collection. They went not only talk to people about what they sell, etc., but also went there to see what happens in the night, what happens in late night, and what happens in early morning. Okay. Then they realized that parking a cart is expensive. Where do you think these carts go? You've seen the other station, no? When there are these carts where people keep selling. Where do they go?
Yeah, get good.
Where?
Inside there, what's it called?
They don't stay there. You know, they have to pay additional money to the buildings nearby to allow them to park their car. And because they occupy more space, they have to pay much more money. Right? This became apparent only when they went in the night to see what happens to the cars, and then they talked to them. They said that it's a fair amount of packet that they have to give it to the owner to allow them to park there. So they came out with an idea that I don't want 1 square meter, but I want it much smaller when they park. Okay, and that's the reason those two wheels open. You know, when you close it, it just becomes about 1 meter by less than half a meter. Okay, so in the current space that is allowed, two of these carts can be parked in the same space where one cart is parked. Okay, so you would save a little more on the. They also looked at how it is sold and where is the person with respect to a customer. Okay, they looked at the whole transaction that takes place, and they found that it was important for the person who is selling to be on the same side as the customer. Okay, because that's how he can handle things better. So this allows all this kind of things to happen. We seem to always expect people to adjust to products rather than adjusting products to people. One example is, all of you would have used taxi, at least when you came to Bombay for the first time, when you came to IIT, you would have used a taxi to bring your luggage. Correct? Anything wrong with the taxi?
Mainly I was able to close the door and
Anything else?
the first thing is that
Huh?
Really better for the taxi for all.
It's just not tall enough for people to keep. I mean, you are young, but imagine older people coming in and out of the taxis is quite. Then?
The first seat needs to be kind when you sit.
Huh?
The first seat,
Huh?
the next to the driver. The distance is too small. You can't put your leg. You have to actually get it somehow. The whole space is too.
Taken by the driver. Yeah. He pushes his seat back so he sits comfortably and the customers are not comfortable. Okay. Anything else? Very worried about the luggage? Yes. Every customer is always worried about whether, unless it's part of the trunk in which it's locked. But the moment you keep it on top, you're always worried. Other people looking back when I slipped out or something like that. Now, you look at all these kind of problems. The reason is because a standard car is being converted, it's sort of, just given a color and a meter so that it becomes a taxi. It was never designed as a taxi. Okay, so this student came out with an idea of taking Maruti Omni chassis and convert that into a taxi. His main idea behind is that passenger space is fairly well defined. It's not driver space is fairly well defined, and there is a space for a luggage inside, so that you can see your luggage all the time. You look at the airport buses. Most people do not want to keep their luggage in the side compartment. They want to carry them with you because you don't know what will happen to it. A lot of people get down halfway, and so these tensions are there. Even Bombay, Pune, you can see that people are not very comfortable putting their luggage in the hold, the section on the side. So, if you watch people, if you travel with them, if you talk to them, maybe you might get some good ideas. Okay? And it's the selflessness of getting ideas that should at least encourage you to work with you. Okay? Because that's the source. But actually it happens like this. Believe me that all the companies that you work for, there will be nobody who is sympathetic to you. Right? You will have to convince, it's your job to say that getting user on your side is helpful, and this is an idea that will appeal to them. Okay? Most of the time you will find that people say, no, kuch ho jayega, don't worry. But don't worry is the way India runs. Okay? But it's important for you to do. So make sure that if there is a group that is discussing, the person who will fight for the user is you. The second person who will fight for the user will be marketing person, but that is not from the idea of doing any benefit to user, how to get more money from. Okay, so the only person who should be concerned, and that's the reason why there is more that is being talked about in design as far as user is concerned. You have studies on user, you have courses on user study, you have all design problems have a separate focus on users, etc. And you remember that it's only in design schools that the word user is used. The moment you go out, there will be either a buyer or a customer. Now you can see the standpoint. They are very different kind of standpoints. Marketing people use the word customer or a buyer. Okay, so you have to convince the people saying that this is not a way to look at it. The correct way to look at it is user. First is you have to accept that all users are not same. Right? You remember that quotation I gave you from Business Week, saying that users are different and we seem to neglect the fact. Okay. This was a cycle which was bought for this girl when she was 2. She selected the cycle. For 2 consecutive days, she just sat on it and rotated the steering wheel. She had no idea that it has anything to do with locomotion. Okay, you can see that her legs are not on the pedal. She was so thrilled with the idea that I have a steering wheel like car. That was good enough for her to get attached to that kind of a product. Okay. Finally, she had to be told. She had to be told that you have to actually drive like this, etc., etc. It came much later. Her brother used the same cycle in a very different way. And he was able to maneuver this cycle with his legs without any difficulty. He would turn, he would go, he would reverse, he would do everything using his legs. Okay. Now, you can see that, look, this is a funny part of it. Why should we bother? Do you know that that kind of cycle already exists? Not this one. Somebody has actually designed a cycle by watching children use their legs to maneuver and have created a cycle where you maneuver with 2 legs. So remember that you're watching people to get ideas, not to tell them you're wrong. This is not the way to drive a cycle. But convert that into an idea. Okay? Saying this is another way of driving, and you can actually be, you train your legs much better in control if you drive a cycle. And that cycle that we design can be driven in both ways. Okay? So watching people is basically to get ideas. So user-centered design is to respect the differences in the expectations of people and to convert them into ideas also, and to offer design responses that does not require people to make compromises. Okay. This is something which should be a focus. Alright, here is an interesting example. I am showing children product because they are easy to relate to. It doesn't mean that IDC designs only children product. There are other products also which are there. This was done. Okay, I'll first show you the slides and then tell me whether it's a girl or a boy who did it. Okay. Who do you think would design such? It's something which helps carry children around. See, right now carrying children means both your hands are tied up. No? The child can suddenly jump and things like that. So it's something which you can keep at the back, also in the front. Yes. Somebody in product design did it. Boy or girl? How many for boys and one for girls? First girls. How many for girls? All boys say it, girls it. I'm sorry, this time you're not right. It's a boy who did that. And that's the reason why I thought that I'm giving a wrong message by asking you to guess in the swing whether the girl or a boy did it. It does not matter who did it. This was done by a boy, and it's very sensitive response to what mothers want, what children want. Yeah? It is, if you are a good people watcher, gender should not matter. Okay, otherwise girls will go with a good intention saying that we are better designers. That's not true. It is important for people to realize that what matters is a concern. Am I really worried about users or not? If I have the right concerns, it does not matter whether you're a boy or a girl, right? And I was quite surprised. It's done by a boy and it's done very well. Okay. What you see on the left side is a typical bag that you get, a typical, what is it called? Carrying children thing. Okay. Now this is something which is available abroad. There is another version which is available abroad, where the child is in the front, right? When he's in the front, he's facing the direction of going, and when he's in the back, he's facing mother's back. Yeah. Now look at our culture. How do we carry children? We carry it this way. What's the advantage of that? You see the child sees you. Yeah. And if the child is crying, you can always play with him, do something or the other, right? So it's a far superior way of carrying a child. It may not be economically right because one side load, all that kind of thing, but otherwise it's a very good way of carrying a child, right? Now why accept things from abroad which do not have this tradition of carrying children this way, right? They tend to carry either this way in the hand, so they create a bag like that, or they carry in the backside. Right? Now, many times our culture already have good solutions which are available. Okay? We seem to neglect it because they don't get documented in the magazines that you see in IDC library, and so you tend to do something which is very typically Western. Okay? Now, what he did is, he looked at how children carry how children are carried by mothers, and came out with a bag which can work either ways. You can either put it at the back or you can put it this way. But the moment you have a bag that holds, both your hands are free. You don't need to hold the child stands on its own in the back, and you can still bus mein ja sakta hai, kidhar bhi ja sakte ho, there's no problem at all. Okay? Plus that you can talk to the child, and that's seen in the next one, the child right in the front. And lastly, and that is quite a surprise, you also realize that putting child into anything which has a constraint is an extremely difficult thing. Just imagine that you have to put that child into that sack. First thing he does is to so you can't put your legs inside. Okay. So he actually changed the whole thing, by which the child doesn't even know that he's being put there. It's actually worn, like a cloth. You just put it onto the floor, put the child, and then wrap it around it, and it has a way of locking, so that the child is very comfortably put into it. Then you lift the child. Okay. Now, This kind of concern or this, it can come only if you are worried about users. If you feel that your profession is expected to benefit children, benefit users, benefit people who use the product, that is what is important. So a standpoint, first standpoint should include not just madness, but also concern for users. So what I'm doing is I'm just gradually adding one more thing. I did talk about madness. Madness is required, but the second thing is concern for users. Okay? Let me see what I can do with it. How I can help people. How it can change the word that you scenario. The scenario of carrying children to the backside, which is not very happy. How can I change that? Okay? If I have that concern and I feel that I should benefit users, I'll always find out the idea. Okay? Now, that still does not come out as good idea. Many people, you have watched all this, right? You watch both kinds of bags, the Western bag. Why is it that it didn't occur to you? That you can also have a bag where you can carry your child this way. One reason why it didn't occur to you is because nobody asked you to design. Yeah? Nobody paid you to design. Okay? Given a chance, one should be able to come out with something which is even more different than this. If you watch our culture, you see how children are handled and how they are lifted and all that. I'm sure one would be able to do even better than this. Yeah? So what is important is that once you have a problem in your mind, watching people is very different than when you don't have a problem. Every day you see people in a hostel, right? But you get adjusted. Oh, aisa hi hone wala hai. It's fine, because that's not a project that you have, right? But the moment you have to design a dining table for a hostel, you start watching people differently. What is the kind of dining table that students of this kind of inclination, this kind of age group and this kind of behavior want? Okay. So unless you sort of keep defining your project, then you start seeing society very differently. Okay. And then you find that it's not a very happy situation. All products are bad. Keep changing your frame wherever you are. Just today afternoon, you can just look at hostels and see. Okay, let me see what can happen to the dining table. Can I change it? So if you develop that kind of attitude, then you will find that problems seem to exist everywhere. All that you need is to intervene and come out with good ideas. Okay, now I talked about functional things, but there are other issues involved. For instance, this is, you're familiar with this cycle, right? The good old, classic cycle, Perculus or some of those brands. This is a slightly modern version of that. Okay. Do you know that it's very difficult to buy this cycle for children? You take a child to a shop and he will never buy this cycle. What he wants is a cycle that has that, they are called as mountain bikes. Yeah? Thicker tires and very swanky looking handles. And now, this is my experience also. That it's extremely difficult to get a child to buy a cycle which is traditional. Okay? Though traditional cycles are far easier to drive, they're smoother and require less energy. Okay? But it does not give them an image that they're looking for. The child does not want to be seen on an old style cycle. Okay? And this is true for, I've seen children from the age of 3 are conscious of their events. What they should do and what they should not do, what they should wear, what they should not wear, they know. All that you have to be is to sensitively watch. Then you realize that almost from age of 2 or 3, they start becoming conscious of what they should. Now, I'll tell you again, come back to how a point of view can come to a different way of user watching. One student, boy or a girl? Boy. How many boys? Not many. This is also a girl. Fine. She came out with an idea that I want to design toys which are only sold through balloon walas. That was the definition about it. Okay? she said that, look, toys in the shops are for rich people. Most people don't buy toys from shops. I mean, most poor people don't buy. They just go to a balloon wala and they buy toys. Where there, when she designed, the cost range was something like 1 rupee to 5 rupee. Now maybe it's slightly gone up to 10. Or there are things which are sold in the railway compartment. They're always around that 10 rupee plus minus type of thing. He says that I want to only design for them, because that's the only way I'll be able to reach people who do not have access to toys. Okay? So they're stuck with very standard kind of toys. Either वो color का spectacle मिलता है, नहीं तो balloon, and then there are some, that monkey which we keep doing. There are no standard things. There's no improvement that has come. So her idea was, can I not do something for them? So she starts with a point of view which has a social viewpoint, saying I want to benefit somebody. Okay, so your point of view can take you to a different social viewpoint and come out with ideas which are, for a different cross section of people, and because they are different cross section of people, it comes out with a different product ideas. So she said that I want to create toys which are only 5 rupees. Cost of it is 5 rupees. So first thing that she did is to come out with a very small toys. These are some finger puppets. You can put them on a finger and make your stories. But there are a lot of moving parts in this. And if you press, the hands go up or the eyes open and close. And done with very simple mechanism. Okay. She also did something which allows children to play with. Some of them are used parts, older product parts used, and some of them are made. It makes a pattern. You put color in it and press it. It gives you a pattern. Interesting part about it is, I don't know whether this particular project was the one that did it, but she continued to work with NGOs to create toys using used material. Okay, she has an office, she runs an office, but she spends part of her time, because she feels it's a social obligation to do something. Which she works with tribals, she works with NGOs to create little toys for them, or little products which they can sell and put. So the point that I am making is that many times projects don't give you a chance. Do not expect project to challenge you. You have to discover a challenge in it. You have to find, and that is where a viewpoint comes in, your own cross section of the way you look at things comes in. But it's important for you to understand that challenge has to be discovered. Very rarely projects come with challenge. In fact, most of the projects come with the stupidest things. All the consultancy we do have very simple things to do. Isko improve karo, isko thora acha dikhna hai. That's the kind of project that comes. Okay. You have to tell them that that is not really the point. The point is that there is something much more that needs to be done, etc. So, if you have a viewpoint, it's possible to get your client across to understand. How point of view helps, and how people watch it helps. This was a project where nothing was defined. Said that you have to design a product for children up to 1 year. That's all. Now you figure out what you want to do. That means there's no project defined. There's nothing like design a toy, design a this or whatever. So they went on asking people, what children do and what is it that will help them. Talk to parents, look at children, and different groups came out with different ideas. I'm just going to show 2 of them. Most mothers told that the most difficult part is to feed children. Okay, they are not the ones who are willing to eat. So, can you do something which will help children eat? Now, obviously, it has something to do with food which you are not designing. Food is something which is given to them by parents, and either it's cooked or it's ready-made or whatever. So, they watched children being fed, and this group of students realized that most of the time there are stories which are told to children, because to divert their attention from eating, to get them interested in something else. And most of them have something to do with animals. And most of them have stories in which an animal comes and gives him a piece of thing to eat. Couch or something, right? He said, why not I convert that into an idea? So he came out with this dish in which there are all these animals are there. So, when a mother gives him, it says this is from this animal, this is from that animal, and make a story out of it. Okay. Now, these stories have existed forever. Children have been fed with these stories. In fact, you would have also been fed, but that when you were too small and didn't know that you were becoming designers. But you would have seen somebody else eating like that. Okay. But only some people look at this as a source of life. Others look at it as a reality that is sociologicist. The fact that mothers tell stories, that they, etc., is a sociological insight. But to convert that into a design is where a designer's insight. That's why it's important to get insights but convert them into ideas. Okay? And that is where your main focus is. One more. What do you think is this? Huh?
Sleeping.
Anything else? Boy or a girl? Forget that, I'm just joking. It was a group, so I got involved in what. But the other group found out that the most difficult thing for that kind of age group is to give bath to a child. Yeah? And the main problem is those dyes who used to come and give knowledge are not available in the cities anymore. So how do I bathe my child without getting him to cry? One of the things that's very important is that the water will go into nose, and there are always all kinds of tension, and the baby is always moving. And things like that. So they came out with an inflated toy-like thing. It's very carefully designed. In fact, it has two layers. The blue layer and the white layer has a separator in between. You put hot water in the blue layer, okay, which hits up the white layer's air and gives you the feeling of a warmth, which is the kind of warmth that you will see when you are on the. Then you can see that those holes, because children are, when they are given a bath or a massage, they are also made upside down, so they have to breathe. Now, for breathing, even if you keep the child upside down, the breathing can continue. Okay. This moment you put a child inside it, because of its child's weight, it goes down slightly and the child gets locked into the position, so it's not likely to sleep. So you can either keep this on a platform or you keep it on the floor. Keep the child on it and the child is fairly stable. Okay, and then give a bath to the child. Okay, and again it doesn't require a storage space because it's all inflated. You just remove the air and it will go back. Now, again, see, basically it was concerned for mothers who were always tense when giving a bath, that outside help is not available, right? And the fact that it's not an easy job to give a bath to a baby, that led them to an idea which, I mean, that was an insight like a sociologist, but they converted that into a product idea. Okay, so the difference between you watching people and other people watching a people is that you're looking for ideas. Be selfish about it. There's nothing wrong in it, because ideas come from watching people. Alright, so I think we have to close. I'll just quickly go through. You have to actually build this into the design process itself. First thing you build it to a design process is the fact that you spend time with children. Time with, if it's a children product, you time with workers. If it has something to do with workers product, you time with students. If it has something to do with student product. So then you look at who buys and who pays for it and what kind of budget. So you interview people who are involved in that. Then you also talk to salesmen and try and find out how they sell a product. Okay, I have lots of stories about it, but we could probably do it next lecture. And then you start looking at how it is produced, etc., which is a typical product design problem. Till then, it is common. Okay, and the point that I am making is the ideation is a process that requires this kind of exposure to users, to who sells and all that. And believe me, ideation is totally dependent on the way you do this. Your point of view, the way you look at all this cross-section of people, how you use the product, don't use the product, misuse the product, all that is important in order for you to react and come out with new ideas. Okay? So there is nothing wrong in being selfish about watching users. You're watching users because you want to come up with ideas. Okay. In the process, if users benefit, it's good. Something they should benefit. I'm not saying no, but the fact is that that's the only, not only, that's one of the ways you can get good ideas. Okay. There are other ways of also getting ideas, but it's an important way of getting ideas, okay, which is close to the user. Right. So we break now, and maybe next time I will talk about systematic way of looking at this. Right. Thank you.